The first thing Jake noticed was the cold. Not the ordinary cold of a winter morning, but a deep alien chill that seemed to seep into his bones. His head throbbed, and the last thing he remembered was walking home from his night shift at the warehouse. Now, everything was different. Slowly, his eyes adjusted to the strange light. The walls around him gleamed with a metallic sheen, unlike anything he'd ever seen on Earth. Smooth, curved surfaces reflected a soft blue-green glow that pulsed like a distant heartbeat. Jake realized he was inside some kind of container. No, a cell. The floor was perfectly smooth, almost glass-like, with no visible seams or corners. He tried to move and found himself restrained. Thin, flexible bands of something that looked like liquid metal wrapped around his wrists and ankles. They weren't painful, but they were impossibly strong. When he tugged, they simply tightened, adapting to his movement with an almost intelligent precision. A sound caught his attention. It wasn't human, wasn't anything he'd heard before. A series of clicks and melodic tones that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Then, a shadow fell across the transparent section of his cell. She was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. Tall, at least 7 feet, with skin that shifted colors like an oil slick. Her eyes were large, too large to be human, with irises that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Multiple thin appendages moved around her head like living tendrils, each one seeming to have its own consciousness. Subject acquired. She spoke, but her lips didn't move. The words formed directly in Jake's mind, crisp and clinical. He realized she was talking about him. The alien woman, if you could call her that, approached the cell. Her movements were fluid, almost serpentine. A device in her hand projected a holographic display that flickered with symbols Jake couldn't understand. But the intent was clear. He was being cataloged, studied. Interesting specimen, she muttered, this time the words emerging as those strange clicks and melodic tones, somehow simultaneously translated in his mind. Primitive, underdeveloped. Potential for research is minimal. Jake said nothing. Years of military training had taught him the value of observation. Watch, listen, learn. Every detail could be a potential advantage. The alien woman, Commander Anxera, according to the holographic display, seemed to view him the way someone might look at a new lab rat. No malice, no emotion, just pure clinical assessment. She pressed something on her device, and Jake felt a slight tingling sensation. Some kind of scan mapping every inch of his body. Classification: Terran, human, low-tier sentient species. The translation in his mind continued. Acquisition protocol complete. Transport to Research Station Gamma 9 initiated. Transport. The word sent a chill down Jake's spine. He was being shipped somewhere, like cargo. Like a thing, not a person. But Jake Martinez was no ordinary human, and Anxera was about to learn that the hard way. As the ship hummed to life around him, Jake began to take stock. His muscles, seemingly relaxed, were coiled like springs. His mind, calm on the surface, was already working through scenarios, calculating possibilities. The restraints might hold his body, but they couldn't contain his mind. The alien woman turned away, apparently satisfied with her assessment. She believed she had acquired nothing more than another specimen for her collection. She was wrong. So very wrong. The ship moved through space like a silent predator. Inside his containment cell, Jake continued his careful observation. Every detail mattered. The way the light shifted, the subtle vibrations of the ship's engines, the patterns of movement outside his transparent prison. Anxera and her crew believed they understood humans. Their holographic displays were filled with what they thought was comprehensive data, physiological measurements, basic genetic information, and what they considered primitive technological achievements. Jake knew better. Information was power, and he was about to prove just how powerful humans could be. The cell was more than a prison. It was a classroom. Jake noticed the maintenance drones first. small, spider-like machines that moved with precise mechanical movements. They cleaned, they repaired, they monitored. Most importantly, they followed predictable patterns. Patterns could be learned. Patterns could be exploited. A small panel near the floor caught his attention. It was barely visible, almost seamless with the metallic wall. But Jake's trained eye had spotted something. A maintenance access point. Most would have missed it entirely. The restraints still held him, but Jake had learned to move within his limitations. Micro-movements, subtle stretches. His muscles remained loose, ready. His mind was already mapping the cell systems. Outside, Commander Angsera reviewed her latest scan results. The holographic display flickered with Jake's medical data, genetic profile, and what the Zilithian researchers considered a comprehensive assessment of human capabilities. Minimal neural complexity, she muttered to her second-in-command, a thin, angular creature with multiple eyes. Basic motor functions, limited problem-solving skills, typical classification for a lower-tier species. Jake heard everything. The translation device in his mind worked perfectly, revealing not just their words, but the underlying content. Hours passed. Jake watched. He learned. The maintenance drones followed a precise schedule. Every 17 minutes and 32 seconds, one would approach his cell. It would run a diagnostic, check the environmental controls, ensure his containment remained secure. 17 minutes and 32 seconds. Plenty of time to plan. His fingers, seemingly relaxed, began to move. Tiny, almost imperceptible movements. Years of special operations training had taught him patience, had shown him how to communicate without words, how to adapt, how to survive. The first drone arrived. Its multiple lens eyes scanned the cell, recording every detail. Jake remained still, too still, like a predator waiting to strike. As the drone completed its routine, something unexpected happened. A tiny piece of material, seemingly random, caught in its mechanical appendage. Jake had carefully worked it loose during his micro-movements. Unnoticeable. Deliberate. The drone's programming began to glitch. Angsera noticed first. The holographic display flickered. The drone's movement became erratic. Diagnostic error, she called out, her translator rendering the words in Jake's mind with clinical precision. But it was more than an error. It was a message, a warning. Jake allowed himself the slightest smile. The first crack in their perfect system. The first hint that their low-tier specimen was something entirely different. Commander Angsera approached the cell, her color-shifting skin rippling with confusion. For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed her alien features. Jake met her gaze. Calm. Calculating. Waiting. The game had only just begun. The maintenance drone's malfunction echoed through the ship like a whispered challenge. In the control room, Commander Angsera's crew scrambled to understand what had happened. Holographic displays flickered with diagnostic reports, error codes dancing like confused fireflies. Jake watched and waited. The ship's internal systems were a complex network of interconnected machines. To most, it would look like an incomprehensible maze of technology. To Jake, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. His military training hadn't just been about combat. It was about understanding systems, breaking them down, finding the weakest points. And humans, despite what the Zilithians believed, were masters of adaptation. The drone that had glitched lay in a small maintenance bay. Technicians moved around it, their multi-jointed limbs manipulating tools that looked like a cross between surgical instruments and computer interfaces. They spoke in quick, sharp clicks and melodic tones that translated directly into Jake's mind. Unexplained interference, one reported. No external signal detected. Impossible, another responded. Something disrupted its core programming. Jake allowed himself a small, internal smile. They were looking in all the wrong places. Commander Angsera approached the disabled drone. Her skin shifted colors, a biological response to confusion and mild stress. Jake had noticed this pattern hours ago. Another piece of information. Another potential weakness. The drone itself was a marvel of engineering. Multiple sensor arrays, adaptive learning algorithms, capable of complex repairs and diagnostic procedures. But like all complex systems, it had vulnerabilities. Jake had found them. During the previous diagnostic cycle, he had used the most minimal of movements. A single finger, a precise touch. Years of training had taught him how to manipulate technology with the subtlest of interactions. The piece of material he'd caught in the drone wasn't random. It was calculated. Now he would push a little further. Another maintenance drone approached his cell. Jake watched its approach, counted the seconds, measured its movements. His mind was a computer, calculating probabilities faster than any alien machine. The moment was precise, exact. A slight shimmer ran through the drone, almost invisible, but to those watching closely, and Jake was always watching, it was a clear sign of system interference. In the control room, alarms began to sound. Multiple system anomalies, a technician called out. Anxara moved closer to the holographic display. Her tendrils moved with increased agitation, each one reflecting her growing concern. The drones weren't just malfunctioning. They were beginning to communicate with each other in ways they weren't supposed to, sharing errors, spreading a kind of digital confusion that looked almost like intelligence. Jake remained perfectly still in his cell. To the casual observer, he was unchanged, a simple human, the low-tier specimen. But something was changing. Commander Anxara turned slowly, her gaze locked onto Jake's cell. For the first time, a hint of something beyond clinical observation crossed her alien features. Uncertainty. Fear. The game was evolving, and Jake was just getting started. Outside the ship's transparent hull, stars moved past, silent witnesses to a battle of wits that was only beginning to unfold. The research station loomed ahead, a massive structure that looked like a constellation of interconnected metal bubbles suspended in the endless black of space. Inside his cell, Jake had been anything but idle. A communication was a weapon, and he was about to prove it. The Zilithian language was complex. Most species would struggle to understand it. But Jake wasn't most species. His military training had included advanced linguistic adaptability, a skill developed for deep cover operations where understanding your enemy was more important than any weapon. Day by day, he had been listening, analyzing, decoding. The translation device in his mind did more than just convert words. It captured nuance, tone, the subtle differences that spoke volumes about the alien culture. Jake realized the Zilithians communicated as much through color shifts and tentacle movements as they did through sound. Commander Anxara no longer viewed him as a simple specimen. Confusion had replaced her initial clinical detachment. Her color-shifting skin now displayed more frequent changes, signs of internal conflict. Impossible, she muttered during one of her routine checks. No low-tier species should demonstrate this level of adaptive capability. Jake had been carefully reprogramming the maintenance drones. Not completely, just enough to create confusion. Small disruptions that suggested something more was happening. Like a master chess player, he was moving pieces that nobody else could see. The ship's communication systems became his first real playground. He discovered weak points, potential pathways, areas where a careful touch could cause maximum disruption with minimal effort. A junior technician approached Anxara, his tendrils moving in a pattern that suggested nervousness. "Commander," he reported, "the human specimen has been accessing communication protocols. But not exactly accessing. It's more like watching." Anxara finished for him. Her skin rippled with a color Jake had come to understand meant deep concern. The research station grew larger. Jake knew this was a critical moment. The closer they got, the more opportunities he would have. The more chances to prove that humans were far from the low-tier species they believed him to be. His cell remained unchanged. The liquid metal restraints still held him. But Jake had learned something important about the Zilithians. Their technology was advanced, but it relied on predictability, on systems that followed precise rules. Humans didn't play by rules. A slight vibration ran through the ship. Most would have missed it, but Jake felt everything. Another drone glitched. Another communication channel flickered with unexplained interference. Aang's era was losing control, and she knew it. "Run a full diagnostic," she ordered, but her voice carried a new tone. No longer completely confident. No longer viewing Jake as a simple specimen to be studied. The research station's massive docking bay approached. Technicians prepared for arrival. Scanning equipment activated. Containment protocols initialized. They thought they were preparing to study a primitive species. They had no idea what was coming. Jake met Aang's gaze. No words, just a look that said everything. A human look. Calm. Calculating. Dangerous. The game was about to change completely. The research station was a hive of controlled chaos. Technicians moved with practiced efficiency, their multi-jointed limbs carrying sophisticated equipment. But beneath the surface, something was changing. Jake had become more than a prisoner. He had become a virus. His understanding of the Zilithian communication systems went far beyond language. He saw the subtle tensions, the hidden power struggles, the tiny cracks in their seemingly perfect social structure. In the control room, two junior technicians argued. Their translator devices rendered their conversation in Jake's mind, revealing more than they intended. "The human specimen is becoming a problem," one said, his tendrils shifting to a color that suggested deep anxiety. "Commander Angsera insists on continued study," the other responded. But there was something else, a hint of doubt, a growing unease. Jake listened and learned. The Zilithian hierarchy was complex, strict. Every movement, every color shift, every tentacle position meant something. To an outsider, it would look like chaos. To Jake, it was a carefully mapped battlefield. He began to plant seeds of doubt. Tiny disruptions in their communication networks. Messages that seemed to come from within their own systems. Suggestions that raised questions. Hints that challenged existing beliefs. A maintenance report here. A subtle communication glitch there. Nothing that would raise immediate alarm, but enough to create confusion. Commander Angsera felt it first. The slow erosion of her control. Her skin shifted more frequently now. Blues of confidence mixing with greens of uncertainty. Reds of growing anger. "Something is wrong," she told her second in command, but she couldn't explain what. Jake had learned something crucial about the Zilithians. Their strength was also their weakness. Their complex communication systems. Their belief in technological perfection. Their absolute certainty of their superiority. Humans were different. Humans adapted. Humans found ways. The research station's lower levels began to show signs of stress. Minor conflicts emerged. Disagreements that would have been impossible before. Tiny cracks in their perfect system. A junior researcher questioned a senior's methodology, unheard of in Zilithian culture. Another challenged a standing protocol. Small rebellions, microscopic mutations in their social structure. And at the center of it all, Jake remained in his cell, watching, waiting. Angsera studied the holographic displays. System after system showed minor anomalies. Nothing major. Nothing that would trigger a full alert. But something was definitely changing. "Impossible," she muttered, but her voice lacked its previous certainty. The human specimen was doing something. But how? Jake allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Humans had survived on Earth by being unpredictable, by finding advantages where none seemed to exist, by turning limitations into strengths. The Zilithians had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity. A low-level communication channel flickered. A maintenance drone moved in an unexpected pattern. A research protocol was subtly challenged. Piece by piece, Jake was dismantling their system, not with force, not with violence, but with something far more powerful. Intelligence, adaptation, human potential. The research station continued its journey through space, but nothing would be the same again. The breaking point came suddenly, and yet for Jake, it had been carefully planned all along. Junior crew members began to question everything. Small whispers, careful challenges, subtle shifts in loyalty that would have been unthinkable in Zilithian culture just days before. Commander Angsera watched her perfect system crumble. The research station's lower decks became a battlefield of ideas, not a physical fight, something far more dangerous, a war of perception, of understanding, of challenging the very foundations of their society. Jake had discovered the critical weakness in the Zilithian social structure. Hierarchy wasn't just a system for them. It was everything. Each individual knew exactly where they stood, who they could challenge, who they couldn't. Until now. A junior technician named Cyril was the first to openly challenge a senior researcher. Her tendrils, typically submissive when speaking to a higher-ranked individual, now moved with unexpected confidence. "The human specimen is not what we believed," she said. The translation device in Jake's cell captured every nuance of her statement. The senior researcher's skin shifted from confident blue to a mix of angry red and fearful green. Such a challenge was unprecedented. Jake had been carefully planting these seeds of doubt. Communication subtly altered. Information strategically leaked. Tiny cracks in their perfect system that were now becoming massive fissures. Commander Angsera felt the ground shifting beneath her. Her once unquestionable authority was dissolving. The crew she had controlled for years was now looking at her with something new in their eyes. Doubt. Questions. The potential for change. In his cell, Jake remained calm. Every movement calculated. Every observation precise. He wasn't just a prisoner anymore. He had become a catalyst. The maintenance drones continued their work. But now, they moved differently, slightly off their previous perfect patterns, small disruptions that suggested something more was happening. How is this possible? Angsera muttered to herself. Her skin rippled with colors that spoke of deep confusion and growing fear. Cyril wasn't alone. More junior crew members began to ask questions, challenge protocols, look at their leadership with new eyes. Jake had learned something fundamental about complex systems. They look strong, but they're often more fragile than anyone realizes. One well-placed touch, one carefully designed disruption, and entire structures could come tumbling down. The research station's communication networks began to change. Information flowed differently. Hierarchies that had seemed solid for generations now looked like they were made of glass. Angsera called an emergency meeting, but even as she spoke, she could see it happening. Her crew was changing, looking at her differently, looking at the human specimen differently. Jake met her gaze from his cell. No words were needed, just a look that said everything. The game had changed completely. Humans were not what the Zilithians believed them to be. Not even close. Outside, stars continued their silent journey, witnesses to a revolution happening inside this massive research station. A revolution started by a single human who refused to be just another specimen. A revolution that was only beginning. Chaos consumed the research station. What had begun as subtle disruptions had transformed into a full-scale breakdown of Zilithian social order. Jake knew this was his moment. The liquid metal restraints that had held him for so long suddenly seemed less secure. Not because they had weakened, but because Jake had learned their exact breaking point. One precise movement, a twist of his wrist that defied everything the Zilithians understood about human physiology. The restraints fell away. Alarms blared. But these were different from previous alerts. These were sounds of internal conflict, of a system tearing itself apart from the inside. Commander Angsera stood frozen in the control room. Her once perfect command structure had collapsed. Junior technicians argued with senior researchers. Maintenance drones moved in unpredictable patterns. Communication channels flickered with conflicting information. Jake moved silently through the ship's corridors, each step calculated, each movement a testament to his years of special operations training. The ship's technology, once a perfect network of interconnected systems, now worked against itself. Jake had turned the Zilithians' greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. Tuxril, the junior technician who had first challenged her superiors, noticed Jake's movement, but instead of raising an alarm, she watched. Fascinated. "The human," she whispered to another technician, "is not what we believed." Jake accessed a communication terminal, not to escape, but to send a message, a warning, a demonstration of human capability that would echo through the entire Zilithian system. Lines of code danced across holographic displays, complex algorithms that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Jake wasn't just hacking the system, he was rewriting it. The research station's primary systems began to shift. Navigational controls altered, communication networks restructured. It was like watching a living organism change its own DNA. Nang's-era approached Jake, no longer the confident commander, now something closer to a scientist witnessing an impossible experiment. "How?" she asked. The translation device in Jake's mind captured her confusion perfectly. Jake said nothing. His silence was more powerful than any words. The ship's external communication array began broadcasting. Not a distress signal, not a standard communication, something else entirely. A complex message that would take years for most species to fully decode. A message about humanity, about potential, about adaptability. Zilithian crew members watched in confusion and growing respect. The human they had captured, the specimen they had planned to study, was now controlling their entire ship. Jake's final move was subtle. He didn't just escape. He transformed the captured Zilithian vessel into a warning beacon, a living demonstration of human capability. The ship's systems continued to evolve, changing, adapting, becoming something neither human nor Zilithian. Something new. Outside, stars watched silently, witnesses to a revolution happening inside this massive research station. A revolution started by a single human who refused to be just another specimen. Nang's-era realized something fundamental had changed. The universe would never look at humans the same way again. Jake had done more than escape. He had sent a message. The transformed ship drifted through the vast emptiness of space, but it was no longer just a vessel. It was a message. Jake had turned the entire Zilithian research station into something entirely unexpected. Not a weapon, not a trophy, but a warning. Multiple communication channels began to light up across alien networks. Strange signals, complex patterns that defied traditional understanding. The broadcast wasn't just a simple communication. It was a multi-layered demonstration of human potential. Alien species across different star systems began to receive fragments of the message. Some were technological blueprints that seemed to rewrite fundamental understanding of engineering. Others were complex linguistic patterns that challenged existing communication theories. Each transmission carried a simple underlying message. Humans were not what they seemed. Deep within the ship's core systems, Jake had embedded layers of information, adaptive algorithms that would continue to evolve, pieces of human knowledge that would challenge and provoke. The Zilithian communication network began to buzz with confusion. Reports came in from multiple research stations. Something unprecedented was happening. "The human specimen," one report read, "has transformed our entire understanding of technological adaptation." Jake wasn't just escaping. He was making the statement. Zixril, the junior technician who had first challenged her superiors, found herself at the center of a growing storm. Her actions during the initial disruption had marked her as different, as someone willing to question everything. The broadcast continued. Pieces of human history, technological achievements, cultural insights, all wrapped in complex, evolving communication patterns that seemed to have a life of their own. Commander Angsera watched in disbelief. The ship she had once commanded was now something else entirely, a living testament to human unpredictability. "We thought we were studying them," she muttered. "We had no idea." The ship's systems continued to evolve. Maintenance drones moved with a new kind of intelligence, Communication networks pulsed with complex, adaptive algorithms. It was like watching a living organism grow and change in real time. Jake had done more than escape. He had created a beacon, a warning, a demonstration. Alien civilizations began to take notice. The message spread, not through traditional communication channels, but through something more fundamental. A complex network of evolving information that challenged everything they thought they knew. Some saw it as a threat. Others saw it as an opportunity. But everyone saw something new about humans. The ship continued its journey, no longer controlled, no longer contained, the living message drifting through the vastness of space. Jake had become more than a prisoner, more than a specimen. He had become a symbol of human potential, of adaptation, of defiance. Somewhere, deep in the ship's systems, complex algorithms continued to evolve, learning, growing, changing. The message continued to broadcast. Humanity was watching, and the universe would never be the same. The debriefing room was unlike any alien interrogation chamber. This was human territory, sterile white walls, precise electronic displays, a place where information was currency. Jake sat calmly, as if his journey hadn't just changed everything humans knew about first contact. The intelligence officers studied him, not with the clinical detachment of the Zilithians, but with a mix of respect and careful curiosity. "Walk us through exactly what happened," the lead investigator requested. Jake's report was precise, clinical, every detail carefully selected. He explained how he had manipulated the Zilithian systems, how he had turned their own technology against them, how he had transformed a potential capture into a message that would echo across alien civilizations. The broadcast he had created continued to spread. Fragments of information, complex algorithms, technological insights that would take years to fully understand. "They saw us as a low-tier species," Jake explained, and that was their first mistake. The intelligence team reviewed the data, the ship's systems, the complex communication patterns Jake had embedded. It was more than just an escape. It was a comprehensive intelligence operation conducted by a single individual. Commander Angzera's fate was sealed. The Zilithian research station's complete breakdown had exposed critical weaknesses in their entire system. Her career was over, her reputation destroyed. But Jake was more interested in what came next. The alien technologies he had accessed, the communication systems he had decoded, they represented a quantum leap in human understanding, not just of alien civilizations, but of adaptation itself. "We're not just a species that survives," Jake said quietly. "We're a species that transforms." The intelligence officers exchanged glances. They understood the implications. This was more than a successful mission. This was a game changer. Outside the debriefing room, screens showed fragments of the ongoing alien communications. The message Jake had sent continued to spread. Complex, evolving, challenging. Zixril, the junior Zilithian technician who had first challenged her superiors, had become a point of interest. Her actions during the initial disruption marked her as someone fundamentally different in her own civilization. The universe had changed, and it didn't even fully realize it yet. Jake knew this was just the beginning. Humanity's first true message to the stars. Not a message of aggression, not a message of conquest, a message of potential, of adaptation, of unexpected capability. The debriefing continued. But Jake's mind was already moving forward. What other systems could be understood? What other boundaries could be challenged? "They thought they owned me," he reflected. The words carried a weight that filled the entire room. "You belong to me now." He remembered the alien commander thinking. How wrong she had been. Humans didn't belong to anyone. They belonged to themselves. And they were just getting started.